So, Leonardo, do you want to just talk to this one?
Yeah, thank you very much for all our community and followers from PM offices. Just want to a friendly reminder to fill up our global survey of project and product management officers. Remember, after you fill up, you are going to receive a copy of the global results. We are talking about PMO, PMO, Agile Management Office, Value Management Office, risk management, change management, but all related, okay, with a PMO. So this is the slide for later at home. Please help us to fill up this survey to have more information for the current state of project and product management offices. Thank you very much for all. Thank you, Fatima. Go ahead, please.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, guys, let's get started. I hope you're bringing the energy because it is early here. So I'm going to try to give you as much energy as possible. Get ready for a lot of information. So make sure you have your pen and your pad ready to take some notes and write down some insights that you learned today. As Leonardo mentioned, I am currently the CEO and founder of Agile Mangement Office, the business and the concept. In my spare time, I also like to volunteer for the biggest national mental health association here in Australia. And I also am a corporate advisor for Aarhus University in Denmark, where we initiated some research in relation to the Agile Mangement Office concept a few years ago and have continued to do that. In addition to that, I also host the Agile Ideas podcast, but my professional passion has seen me govern change and work across projects, programs and portfolios and the PMO space in portfolios of $1 billion Australian dollars and 16 different industries globally. So I've had the opportunity to work 22 different companies and also in 16 countries. So very, very fortunate to have had that opportunity to do that. I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the story before I get into the details around the AMO concept, to give you a bit of an overview of the background. From a really early age, I was very curious and a problem solver and someone who naturally found ways to be resourceful. And that's when I fell into project management. So straight after secondary college, I fell into project management by accident, and I've been in project management for the last 16 years and absolutely love it. I started my first business in 2012, and then the idea for AMO concept, the AMO method and Agile Mangement Office overall came to fruition in 2014. I then applied my concept and my philosophy at a Big Four national bank here in Australia that I will tell you more about. And then the actual business itself was established in 2016. I then conceived the white paper in 2018, partnered with the university in 2019, and now continuing to work with clients across the world. My promise to you today is I'm going to help you understand why the AMO concept was conceived and the necessity for why it was conceived, take you behind the scenes of an AMO in action, introduce 5 approaches, techniques for your PMO agility, and tell you how we can stay connected. Globally, more and more organizations are moving to more agile ways of working. This specific issue has left project management offices in the world in a little bit of a predicament. Basically, you need to transform the way that you work or you become dissolved. But before we can start talking about improvements, we need to understand some of those challenges in a bit more detail. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to take you behind the scenes of some of our research and look at the history of PMO based on the work that we've done over the last couple of years. What we've done is learnt from those challenges, learnt from those real life examples, and learnt from our customers in order to develop a concept that can work for everybody. So let's look at the project and PMO evolution first. So as part of our global white paper series, we took a look back at the history of PMO and where it's come to be today. We looked at undertaking on-site research with clients and discussions over about 2 or 3 years. We took interviews across 7 countries. We had interviews with academics in Australia and in Europe. We reviewed existing research papers and academic information available, and we ran a global survey as well. And what we found was there's a stark contrast between the history of project management, which you can see there's been quite a lot of evolution for. And when we compare that to the PMO, it's actually a very different story. When we think about the term project office, it dates back to the early 1800s, and it was used as a way to drive productivity to support a significant number of projects. But then it started to slowly change, although the premise of the Project Management Office has not really changed that much. In fact, most of the changes in and around the PMO have always been referenced or embedded in project management. And you can see that when you look at things like the PMI, or when you look at Prince2, etc. Agile PMO itself is very new. There's no clearly defined framework or method or anything like that. There wasn't, and there still really isn't. So we started to develop that 4 years ago. When we look at Agile and the PMO, which is becoming a big discussion point globally, it's because of 3 key reasons. One, because PMO has never, up until recently, existed in the conversation with Agile. Many managers don't know what to do with their existing PMO teams when they decide they want to go on the Agile journey. Because the rise of Agile delivery teams has left a lot of gaps within governance, process, and the previous control that executives used to have when they did have PMOs. And 3, because up until recently, there's been an assumption that the PMO is not required or that they cannot evolve since they are already so far behind. Remember, a function that is misunderstood will never, ever drive value. So as I mentioned to you, when you look back at the very first concept of project management offices, it was the project office. It was there to increase productivity in projects. Then we had the program office, and that was controlling costs transparently across the different projects. And the variations continued. Then we have project support. Then we have portfolio PMO. Then we have the ePMO, followed by PMO standards. Then we had the Center of Excellence, the most advanced component of the PMO. And now we're seeing the Agile PMO. As the variations of PMO proliferated across the world, so is the confusion and the challenge of managing stakeholder expectations. This is where you start building blocks bit by bit, and we're literally getting to a point where it's becoming a little bit like PMO Jenga, where you're taking bits and pieces of previous things and we're putting it on top, and we're taking more out and we're putting it on top. And it's really, really hard for executives to keep across what it is that we're trying to do. So the PMO itself is becoming quite unmanageable. When we did our research, we identified 7 priority challenges as part of the work that we did last year. And these are evident not only in our own research, but in almost every survey that we have researched, in almost every academic paper where they were looking at it. Whether you're looking at a KPMG survey or a Deloitte survey or a McKinsey survey, whenever we're finding surveys around the PMO, these are probably the most prominent challenges that are existing. And then there's plenty of others, but these were the top 7. It's how do we keep up with Agile, and how do we drive change if we're not structured right? Where do we fit within the organization? Do we report to the CIO? Do we report to the CEO? Do we report to a project manager? Why are our stakeholders unclear about what we do? Why are project managers not advocating? Why are project managers not putting their foot down and saying, we need to keep this PMO because they make our lives easier? Why is there a perception that when you add the layers of governance that comes with PMO, that things will slow down? And how do we improve when there's almost no budget going to the PMO to uplift their capabilities? And then finally, Why do we always have to justify our existence? How many times do we have to constantly prove why we have adding value and why we need to exist? And these are some of the questions that we asked. Today, I want to focus on governing in agile ways and focusing on agility. Governing in agile ways, both from an agility perspective and from a perspective of being prepared for agile. Because most of the PMOs that we spoke to and others in our survey said they were not prepared. Even though agile has been around for over 20 years, it's not new, but the reason it's becoming more of an issue for PMOs is because there's an obvious disconnect between what the delivery teams need and what the PMOs themselves are doing. Think about how many agile coaches are there now helping delivery teams to be successful. But how much of that is there for PMOs? None, zero. I mean, only up until very, very recently, I've started to hear articles talking about the agile and the PMO from an article I've seen from Deloitte recently. And even with the scaled agile for enterprise, so SAFe, the SAFe agile, one of the biggest agile framework methodologies that exists, they've only just recently started introducing the PMO into their discussion. But prior to that, there was very little when it comes to governance. Why? Because it's needed, it's a necessity, but they don't know how to make it work. Thankfully, we figured it out, and we're here to share some of that insight today. When we interviewed some CIOs in the last couple of years and asked them about what they're doing with their PMOs, most of them said they were dissolving them. They were dissolving their PMOs, which is not a positive thing for many of us who do provide value. And also, when you think about agile and you think about PMO, the assumption is that governance is always waterfall in nature. Yet governance, we know, is actually not waterfall in reality. And so some of these are some of the things that came to mind when we started thinking about how we take agility, not just agile, and actually make it work for us. So what is an AMO and what does it look like? Well, let's start off by talking about what do we mean by agile. Now, when we think about agile, there's so many differences between agile, that is big A agile, and that is the official formal agile, the Agile Manifesto, and all of the agile methodologies that have came into play that you use when you want to do delivery in an agile way. These are the things that you can see. Although when I'm referring to agile, I'm referring to small A agile. And small A agile is all about the softer skills and all of the things that you need to be successful, regardless of whether you're running waterfall or agile methodologies. This is applicable to any PMO, and it should be something that we are taking into consideration, utilizing and thinking about all the time. So we're talking about both big A agile and small A agile. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. In 2014, and you may remember when I first started talking to you today, I mentioned to you that in 2014 is where the AMO method concept came into mind. I was engaged to set up a global PMO. Now, it was global because it spanned 13 countries. I had a requirement and a remit to support Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and Pacific. And in total, we have 13 countries that we had to bring together for this major program of work. It was the most important program for one of our big four banks in Australia in that time. And it was a program that we were running directly for the CEO. It was something that I needed to define frameworks for, and I needed to define governance that could not only support the program centrally from the perspective of the head office, which was running out of Australia, but also I needed to think about how do I get governance to be consistent so that we have proper reporting, proper collaboration, and effective outputs across all of those other countries as well. So I started looking at what the bank had at that time, and I realized there was actually not much there from the perspective of global programs or global program governance. And it was quite challenging because we needed to take cross-divisional funding, which means funding from multiple different parts of the bank as opposed to one area. external funding from a vendor who was providing a significant injection of funding to help us deliver this program for them, as well as significant complexity. We had 9 governance forums globally. We had Agile and Waterfall methodologies. New Zealand was running Agile. Australia was running Waterfall. Some of the Asian countries had a bit of both. We had 6 enterprise portfolio management software tools that were being used as per the different regions. Each one had their own requirements of us having to report into them. We found that we had 23 monthly reports being created that needed to give a status to different forums and governance bodies across the countries. We had vendors internationally all over the world that were required to support this program of work, each with their own funding, whether it was Australian dollars, Great Britain dollars, US dollars, and so forth. We had 14 different cost centers. And in addition to that, we had different legal requirements. We had different accounting treatments. Some countries had different CapEx rules, and we had 7 master schedules going across this program of work. It was something that I realized, because there was no precedence in this organization, I needed to develop something that could support and meet the requirements of this global program of work. And it was quite complex. The best part was, after developing this framework, I was able to deliver this global PMO program of work for this organization with just 3 people. That's right, 3 full-time resources was all we had. That was the budget given to us, and we made it work, and we supported the program. The program itself was the most successful program for this organization since they started tracking programs in their post-implementation reviews. We had to synergize governance across the value chain, and we had to do it agnostic of the methodology. We couldn't spend weeks or months debating which method we were going to use. We just had to get on with it. We had to forget about proliferating multiple various PMOs across the company and across the countries. We had to focus on building a centralized governance body that would report in and basically sit alongside the rest of the organization. We had to make sure that we were taking the time not only to develop a model that will scale, but make sure it was efficient. It needed to balance the requirements of all the different management teams across the world. And we needed to make sure that we were not just governing, we were actually supporting. And we became a key partner to support, from managing the entire program budget globally to managing all of the resources onboarding, over 100 resources onboarded within a 2-year period. And we also needed to make sure that all our stakeholders were satisfied, and they were, and the results were proven in the post-implementation review. How did we do this? Well, there's a number of ways, but this is where the concept of the Agile Management Office came into mind. It was about developing a function that focused on helping the delivery teams to deliver more. They had 24 installations within a 2.5-year period globally. It reduced rework because we only had 3 resources. We had to be really, really smart and efficient and around how we actually managed this function. We had to make sure that all our stakeholders were on board. And we needed to make sure that we had flexibility in our governance framework to support all of the nuances that came from running a global program that was absolutely that complex. And one of the key things we did is targeted the high value areas first, and then we shifted priority and attention to where it was needed most. And that is what the AMO helps you to do. To further evolve our concept, the AMO method, which supports running an Agile Management Office, we needed to actually take some time to actually investigate it from an academic perspective. After the success of the Agile Management Office in a Big 4 bank, we thought, wow, okay, can I do this again in a different industry? And at this point, we decided to do it in our second largest supermarket chain in the country, in retail. And we wanted to conduct a research project to understand how effective our approach was and whether it could be repeated. So we undertook a research using an action research cycle, which was introduced to me by a professor at the University of Queensland. And I also started working with a professor at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. And what we needed to do is understand the starting position. And that is like you do if you're a doctor in an emergency room, you need to understand what treatment is required, effectively the interventions. And then after you've given the treatment to the patient, measure the results of how that patient progresses. How's their blood pressure? How is their heart rate, etc. So we needed to do something like that, but actually from a governance perspective. So we utilized the AMO method itself and all of the stages within that to establish the individual steps required in order for us to help provide a point in time before we intervened with our method and our approach, and how we then instigated that change. So we did 5 key things. First of all, we established a baseline. And the AMO itself always starts and stops with the executives. It's one of the key strategic drivers is to improve the annual employee engagement scores. And so that was a really big part of this work that we did with this supermarket. We developed our MVP, which is our minimum value proposition, and we agreed where things that we had to start doing, stop doing, do more of, and do less. We built out a framework, which we integrated from the people, the information, the governance, and the delivery of the change. We also then embedded the change with their team. We helped their team understand what they needed to do and how they can get involved. And because they were listened to, they were very grateful. And then we always make sure that we embed and provide that ongoing formula for embedding via the continuous improvement path. We took reference of our current state in the baseline stage, and then we looked at it again. And what we found was in less than a year, there was a 15% increase in employee engagement scores. This department that we applied the AMO concept to was the highest score, 8% above the average of all the other departments within this supermarket. We increased the maturity based on 2 levels. And when we surveyed all of the staff members, they rated this approach 9 out of 10 for effectiveness. So what is an AMO exactly? Well, it's made up of a few things. First of all, you've got the method. The method is a highly effective approach that it defies the prescriptive one-size-fits-all approaches. It takes away the rigidity of traditional governance and it brings with it an agile flavor. The framework, it's a library of guiding principles that brings together proven practice. It brings together tools, techniques, templates, all of the things we're learning. Every time we learn from our customers, we re-embed and update our method and the framework that supports it. And then it's our people, the people side of it, the people, the AMO consultants themselves, those that have had the opportunity to go through and utilize the method and the framework can then ultimately apply that in other organizations and continue to see the same results. Now we do that, making sure that throughout that approach, the ultimate goal of the AMO is to provide complete flexibility. No more command and control rigidity. You must do this, you must do that, because it doesn't work. We know that. We make sure that we're introducing positive behaviors and we make sure that we drive value. Now, these may seem very simple, but they make a world of difference if done really well. Now, where and how does the AMO work within an organization? Well, let's take a look. First of all, when you think about an organization, we break it up into 3 parts. You've got the strategy. think of this. Every for-profit organization's objective is to increase revenue, right? So doing so will often lead to more investment in projects. You'd hope so. So our strategy is the organization's path and how they intend to increase their revenue and why most of us are employed to support the realization of those strategic objectives. So when you think about the strategy, this is the how. This is the how. This is the way that we want to make sure that we're meeting those strategic objectives for the organization. Then we look at the strategy being the why. Then we look at the delivery, which is the how. And the delivery, this is the space where you transform or change the business. This is where all the project managers go and all the governance and all the current PMOs and all of the delivery stuff, all the transformations, etc., is in the how, in the purple. Then along the journey, sometimes we need to stop at various platforms. Imagine we're on a train track to top up our fuel and to take a restroom break and deliver bad news sometimes on project budgets or report how many passengers are on the train. Think of that as the reporting. This is the role of the operations team. They help to make sure the train stations are active and running. Think of this as the where. We often forget that to navigate this path, we need to facilitate, motivate, and direct the train, its drivers, and its passengers, making them aware of potholes, when the train tracks are approaching, red lights, when we need to service it to prevent accidents, etc. That's the AMO in the center. It brings everyone together while maintaining a safe distance. It defines the guardrails and it monitors the performance for improvement. Think of this as the integration point. So we start with strategy and we work top down. We also work from operations and work bottom up. And then we also align side to side. Doing so, it means that we can not only establish the frameworks, establish the service and the function that supports the value chain, but actually can monitor it as well. And that is fundamentally how the AMO connects and is connected across the value chain within an organization. It starts and stops with the executives and it connects throughout. The AMO specifically is there to close the gap and to address a number of challenges which you heard me talk about before. It provides flexible agile governance. It's always aligned to the executive. It's very, very interactive in the way that it works. It will bridge the gap with delivery. It helps to improve the efficiency, resulting in greater capability uplift and continuous improvement. And it also demonstrates ongoing value. Why? Because it's visible and it's transparent and it helps you to solve problems quicker. There are some myths that we've observed in the Agile PMO world that we've come across in the journey, and I thought I would share some of these quickly with you. These are some you might have heard of. My favorite one is that they assume everybody in the PMO must become a Scrum Master. No, but it's possible that people with those skill sets can. The assumption that you cannot do anything waterfall. No, that's not correct. I've actually seen many, many organizations, and not one of them in the last at least 5 years have done pure end-to-end Agile. None of them. They're all still doing elements of waterfall as well. You can't track or manage costs. That's a myth. It's busted. You can't set up or use frameworks, or you don't need a schedule. And the most common one, the PMO is no longer needed. So how do we develop functions with a focus on agility? When we think about Agile, if it's a kind of manufacturing approach for ideas, for new ideas, it's the practice that enables organizations to act on these new ideas, and the AMO supports that. It's important to emphasize, though, that however, Agile is not where new ideas come from. Remember, that's from the strategy, from the strategic objectives, from the organization's executives. But The delivery and the concept and the support of AMO is how they are rapidly iterated, improved, and deployed. That's where AMO provides the most value for the delivery teams. Therefore, the focus in the PMOs should be the same. We're there to help rapidly iterate, improve, and deploy some good process, some tools, methods, everything that's going to help the agile delivery teams to deliver value sooner to their customers. And the reason why we need to make sure we continue to think about this concept as a way moving forward is because wherever the PMO sits in a traditional organization structure can vary as much as the flavors of ice cream. So let me take you through 5 techniques, ideas, suggestions for you to help you moving forward. One of them is take a stock take like you would do. We used to do stock take in retail and had to count everything in the store, and it would take weeks and weeks to work out how much stuff we had in the store and how much was stolen, how much we sold, etc. Do a stock take on your PMO and assess everything that you're doing today, review every process, understand its current state, identify where it starts, identify where it ends, review who it benefits, understand how it fits into your organization's ecosystem. Remember, it's about delivering more value from less work so that the client always gets value sooner, and resolving complex problems across internal silos. And you can't do that if you don't take a stock take check of where you are up to today. Creating transparent feedback loop with your customers. Now, this may sound really simple, but it's not. It's actually the most involved process of the entire AMO concept and method. There is so much over communication that's needed, checking alignment and rechecking alignment, developing roadmaps with customers, and understanding that you need to invite that dialogue and ask your customers what you can do to improve. Gone are the days where PMOs come into an organization and do whatever the hell they want, thinking that they're adding value when really their customers are just talking behind their back saying that they're not happy. So you need to create that transparent feedback loop with your customers, not only once at the beginning, but ongoing throughout the journey. You need to be making sure you're getting constant feedback and having an approach and a consistent process for how you actually do that. Clearly define your minimum value proposition. Now, for those of you that are really good in Agile, you'll know that MVP stands for minimum viable product. I understand. But in our case, in an AMO case, it's actually the minimum value proposition. Whether or not the PMO is providing value to an organization is largely dependent on who you speak to. I'm sure that you listening today will have experienced not only people that love your PMO or love PMOs in general, but those that hate it as well. And that is because they've had some past bad experiences. There are several justifications for this. Sometimes it's the perceived value versus actual value. You might think you're providing value, but your customers don't think that. The most common problem is when the typical PMO often lacks the authority and the autonomy required to effectively govern. This is evident with all the PMOs that don't have any budget and don't have any say in what happens with them. They actually don't have an option when it comes to things. So the PMO itself then becomes something that's unnecessarily seen as an extra cost. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, many of the executives I spoke to in a survey we did said that they were dissolving their PMOs because they clearly didn't see the minimum value proposition. There was a small percentage that said that they're resizing, but many of them said no. So organizations themselves, in order to respond, need to understand how it is that your PMO function is supporting them. And you can do that by clearly defining that value proposition upfront. We also need to make sure that when we think about defining that minimum value proposition, that you're also being part of their environment. So if you are trying to be an agile PMO, although I believe every PMO should be agile in nature anyway, and so it's just a PMO that's being more agile, I think you need to take the time to be part of the agile delivery cycle. shadow a project manager that works in that, shadow the scrum masters, be part of the stand-ups, look at the Kanban walls, whatever it is that you need to do to understand the value that you need to provide to make their lives easier. Because the more they deliver effectively and consistently, the more likely you're going to be given some credit for that. Likewise, if they fail, then it's also going to come back on that PMO that's supporting them as well. Introduce agile ideas. So we need to consider that people themselves, from an agile perspective, need to think about things like quick experimentation, continuous learning, etc., etc. And we need to make sure that it's easy and convenient and personalized to them. So your framework for governance needs to support that particular team. But introduce some new ideas. For example, in an Agile Management Office, we've got specialist teams. It's not dependent on one person. It's not like there's one AMO manager and that AMO manager is away and then all of a sudden things fall over like they do in some PMOs. We can also introduce external inductions. When we were running that global program, we had so many external vendors on board. And so what we needed to do is make sure that we brought on board those vendors in a way that they can understand where we were up to, the landscape of how things work, and get them on board as quickly as possible so we don't delay testing or development or any of those other things. Third-party integration. Sometimes vendors themselves or other third parties are involved, whether it's another department, etc., are involved in the programs and projects that you're running. So how do we create a process to integrate them better than having to have so many lines of communication from the individual people in the delivery teams going out to these third parties? Maybe we can funnel that through the central PMO. Introducing culture checks. As I said, one of the biggest objectives and strategic drivers is increasing the employee engagement scores. And I told you that in 1 year, we did it up by 15%, which is something that the executive at this organization said she'd never seen in her career. And she'd been working in her career for over 25 years. And then office stability. When you think about office stability, well, that is exactly what you imagine it is. Agile teams often at the moment, it's a bit challenged. They're not maybe working as closely in an office, or at least here we're not so much. But providing the stability, how to get in, accessibility to tools, getting your onboarding done, laptops, how to access a desk, where to find what you need to find, how to get to and from locations, making sure you've got access to the right technology, do you have the right stand-up areas, etc., etc., and actually providing that stability that is needed to be effective. And then the fifth one, forget the rigidity of applying delivery methodologies. Don't use a delivery methodology like PMBOK or Prince2 for your PMO. They are delivery methodologies, and they are for delivery teams, not for PMOs. Instead, think about driving value. Driving value means thinking about it from a strategic perspective. If your executive is not supportive, it's because they've not seen the value, and it means it's time to pivot. You don't change people's minds. You get common ground agreed and you bridge the gap. The organizations themselves needs to have a level of agility, and you can help support that. But you can't do that if every time the delivery chain changes the methodology they're using, you have to re-change everything you're doing as well. And remember, always question why. I'm going to leave you with a few things today, and you'll get a copy of this presentation. The method guiding principles. These are the 12 AMO method guiding principles that I recommend that you utilize and live your PMO by, because they will improve the way that you work. I'm going to leave you with an ideas checklist for some things to consider and think about based on what we talked about today. And also remind you of this quote, which is the way that I imagine an Agile PMO. One that's few steps ahead of delivery, proactively clearing the tracks for delivery trains, whilst keeping all the train customers informed on where they are going, how long it will take for them to get there, and how to be safe while on the train, and answer any questions while checking everyone has the right tickets. And all of this information comes together, and there is in leaving you and closing out today, I will let you know that there is an opportunity to take all of this and actually be part of a program that we will be running later this year to take all of this and actually turn it into actionable activities within your functions. If you're interested in learning about the 8-week program, which will kick off later this year, just email me. Email is on your screen, and I can help you guide yourself to be more agile, help you if you're setting up a new function, or even help you implement some of the AMO principles in your organization so you can be effective immediately. Thank you. That is my presentation. I'm going to pass on to Leo for the last 10 minutes for questions, but I just will ask one more favor. If you appreciate a week of effort that it took to prepare this presentation and the wake up early, I'd appreciate if you found it helpful, please make a post on LinkedIn and tag me in it. Tell some people about the presentation or share it when you receive it. Thank you, and I will pass back to Leonardo.
Hello,
Over
Fatima.
to you. Hello.
Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful. For all the audience, I never have done before this, okay? It was so interesting. Please, if anybody have any questions, I know it was very clear, but at the same time, I think we have many or a few very interesting questions. So please, by the chat, if anybody want to ask something, please let us know. In the meantime, can you Fatima, can you play the video if it works? I'm not very sure.
I don't have it. It's a picture.
Ah, okay. So apologize. Yeah. It was
Do you want to share the screen on your side? I'll stop share.
Well, okay. Meanwhile, somebody is going to ask something. Sure. I have many questions, by the way, but I wanna let our audience to ask first. Meanwhile, I'm going to chat the video. Okay, Fatima, let me search, please. Yeah.
No problem.
Anybody have any question, please? It was very clear. Yeah, perhaps it's a new concept. Yes, I'm agree. It's very different. It's very different as Agile PMO. Perhaps we were confused because most probably we thought no, it was a PMO and it wasn't. Perhaps I don't know. Anyway, any question? Okay, let me introduce Fatima.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
right now I'm in a traditional PMO framework or PMO methodology. Okay, how come? It's two questions, only one. In one question, in two parts. The first part, okay, I want to present to top management. We need to go agile, but without any methodology, okay, or any framework in agile frameworks. It doesn't matter if lean, scrum, whatever. No, we want to move or we want to improve to agile mindset. We want to implement or to share Agile Management Office method. So which is your best or your first objective or your first advice for us if we are currently working in a traditional PMO?
So I think that what you need to do first is take a stock take check of where you're up to. So do a deep dive, understand your landscape. A lot of the times executives don't get to see the lower level of detail that we take part in, and they need to get a high level view of that. But we need to do the deep dive first in order for us to be able to highlight the opportunities that will come from pivoting towards a more agile way of working, be it the Agile Management Office way. But the way that you're going to do that is first by identifying where you are today and taking a baseline check. So for example, I mentioned we always take a maturity check of where we're up to. And we run that and we work out where we are first. Because if you're going to introduce something, you're going to have to demonstrate how it improves where you are today and how that improvement's going to happen. Without taking a baseline check of where you are based on maturity, customer feedback, being your stakeholders, etc., you won't know if you've improved. You'll just may have exhausted resources and effort and time to change. So I would want to take a stock take check of all your processes, all your frameworks. If you don't already have a repository and a view of what that looks like, list out all your processes, list out who they're for, list out what the effort involved in doing those. You know, does it take you 10, 20 hours a week to do one report? Well, that's not very agile. So these are the things that we need to look at. We need to look at what, we need to look at the who, and we need to look at the why. Once you've defined those, then you can start thinking about which of these can we start moving towards more of an agile flavor. For example, reporting, you could take that path of reporting and actually do it in an agile way, be it, you know, with stand-ups instead of PowerPoint packs and things like that. So they're all little incremental wins that you'll do. But I definitely say start with your baseline to understand where you are. So when you make a recommendation to change, you can put some real good measurements behind it.
Okay, wonderful. This is, okay, I will share this idea with the top management. But what about the operational, the teams? Because perhaps the teams are waiting for implementing or development the Scrum framework. But if we are talking about the Agile Management Office, I can be to convince them to the teams, and how can we manage to the operational teams? Yeah.
So with everything we've been doing over the last 4.5 years, we've been using the AMO method. The AMO method is effectively the methodology I've developed that actually takes the best of Agile, the best of Waterfall. It takes the best of everything that we've seen and experienced. And to demonstrate the value, and I'm going to kind of part answer Sergio and Hami's question, is when we do our stock take check and understand where everything is at this point in time, we don't do that and then we just go and make suggestions to change. We actually educate our customers. We meet with them. We ask them, what do you want? And when we put a plan together, similar to a backlog of all the things that they want. Now, when we met with our client, the retail, they had over 300 things in the backlog. That's impossible to deliver with the budget they had allocated. So what we need to do is prioritize them. And once we've prioritized them, we're then able to put forward changes that the customers, your stakeholders, have already asked for. And that's how you're going to get them on board, because you're going to deliver things that actually are going to benefit them. They've told you that, and that's how you know.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. One of the most difficult things is when we are trying to share with the management and the rest of the company that we need to prioritize. Now, first of all, categorization, and next one, categorization. It's very difficult. Yeah, top management with all the portfolio in products, projects, whatever, and the next one with operational, with the product backlog, because we are so many things that it's impossible. You're absolutely correct. It's impossible to manage that. And who is first? Who is next one? Everybody wants his own products, his own deliveries at the same time, because everything is important. The most important is his own things. So if you have 300, 200 at the same time, no, I don't think it can be handled that. Thank you very much. Hey, we have another, thank you, Fatima. We have another questions, okay, from...
Yes. See them on the chat?
Yeah, in the chat. Sergio Vasquez.
Okay, so Sergio, so how can you survive and add value with something in the middle of a chaos, too many methodologies, etc.? And does the AMO have a plan, or is it constantly changing? So the AMO itself is perpetual, which means it's living. It's a living, breathing, changing, regular. Does it have a plan? Yes. So after we go through the first stage of the process, we end up with an initial plan and a roadmap and a journey. And remember, I said at the end, we get to continuous improvement. Does that plan change? Yes. if the customer's expectations, requirements, or something comes into the foreplay, for example, we had COVID come through and we had to change the way we were working, that's where the flexibility that I mentioned to you changes. If what we're doing does not provide value, i.e. we get feedback from multiple of the measurements that we use that it's not providing value, we pivot, we change. The way that you survive is by putting in place a plan of attack that you get endorsement from your customers and your executives in order to move forward. And so you definitely have a plan, but the plan is always flexible to change. We also, I'll add, in terms of the next question from, I hope I pronounced it correct, but it looks like maybe Hamer, hopefully that's right. Yes, we do have a backlog and we do work in cycles. So at the moment, depending on the organization and the length of time that we're working, so if we're changing a whole department, well, the cycles might be monthly. If we're working on changing a small team that maybe is a small business and maybe it's only 50 people, well, that might be fortnightly sprints, for example. So it really just depends on the size of the organization, but overall, using the AMO method and the framework and all of the tools, that stuff is always there, and you just continue to use that regardless of the size. So one thing I didn't mention is the framework itself, the method, etc. The agnostic of methodology, it's agnostic of the size of the organization, and it's agnostic of the industry. And it doesn't matter the size of what you're trying to follow. It works for all of it. You just scale it as you need. To answer Luis's question, so the best time to see results. So we have found results in as quick as the first month with some of the items we were addressing. In 2 months for one client, we saw that we identified $2 million Australian dollars of missing funds that we found by cleaning up their financials. Within the retailer, we found that we got results quite quickly within the first 3 months, making some significant change. And then within 8 months, we improved their maturity by 2, from level 0 to a level 2. And then with the big global organization, as an example, that saw results over the long term. We saw bigger results towards the end. But you should start seeing results with the AMO concept. If you're using the method well and you're following the approaches I've discussed, you should be seeing results as quick as within the first few weeks. I think I've got them all, Leo.
Anybody else have any other question? Fatima, I know that it's not easy, but many people right now, many organizations are using the Scrum framework, okay, currently, yeah. So how can combine, or how can live together AMO with Scrum, for example? It doesn't matter the organization, it doesn't matter the company, it doesn't matter the sector, no, public or private, but how can we live together? How can we do for living together Scrum and Agile Management Office method?
So this might be a controversial answer, but if you remember, I said that leave the delivery methodologies for delivery. Scrum is a delivery methodology that the project, I know they don't call them project managers, but I'm going to use the traditional term. The project managers, the Scrum masters, the developers, the testers, the coders, they're the ones that use Scrum. You, in the governance world, in the AMO world, we need to know what Scrum is. We need to understand it. And we need to make sure that when we're putting processes in place around reporting, or when we're putting processes in place around prioritization or the investment upfront for initiatives, depending on what your PMO does, you need to understand the Scrum world. But Scrum is for delivery, not for the PMO governance. So there's definitely an appetite to understand it, an appetite to the only parts of incorporating it is understanding how investments and funding up front comes from, you know, the executives and the pool of money that comes at the beginning, and how that gets passed on to delivery, etc. But really, it's up to the delivery teams to be managing that, and we just need to be aware of it and make sure we're referencing it in the relevant parts of our framework that we develop from a governance perspective.
Wonderful, because many companies right now currently are using Scrum framework. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that it's not the only one. They can combine it with another frameworks, on methods, like your Agile Management Office method. So we need it. We need to use the best tools, the best methods, the best framework, the best governance as we can, not only to get only one, no, or only one organization. No, I think as you currently sharing us, no, absolutely. I'm full agree. Any other questions? No. I have many questions, but I don't want to ask this myself. Fatima Jaume is the name of this guy that, okay, he's Catalan from Barcelona name, okay? Yeah, Jaume, very good question, no? Any other guy, any other girl? No? No? Oh, well, my final question, Fatima. Okay, everybody say thank you. Obviously, it's a wonderful, it's very, very, very interesting. Yes, Sergio, absolutely, I'm agree, excellent. I lost it. Sorry. Yeah, because I was thinking that a good question, but I don't know why I forgot. Oh.
Well, you're welcome to stay online with me, because we've got to do a debrief anyway, so we can continue chatting after we finish the webinar if you like, and if you think of the question, maybe we can let everyone know the answers.
Okay, I'm agree. Yeah, because for example, excellent approach, a new concept. That's correct. Yeah, it's wonderful. That's why I invited. No, Claudia, Carmen, Marcelo, because it's a new method, it's a new concept that is very for us, from PM officers, it's very important to find the new concepts or the new methods or the new frameworks that can we use in any organization all over the world, because
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because the current people are using only one framework as PMI. That's wonderful, obviously. Yeah, but there is only Scrum, and many organizations believe that it is the only agile or the best agile framework. Many people, I think, wrong, is thinking that a Scrum like methodology.
Yes.
It's not. It's a framework, but so this is a method, remember.
That's right. So the idea is that you take a certain number of steps, which is part of what we do is we utilize the method to develop a series of steps. We follow a series of steps to develop a framework that suits your organization, your team, your size of your organization. If you're small at the moment, we did work in a specific department. We're now scaling that to other departments, and hopefully in time we'll get across the whole organization. So the idea is that you utilize the fail-proof steps, which is our method that we've developed over the last 5 years, and myself over the last 16 years. And those steps, which is what I teach in the 8-week program, will help you to move towards a more agile way of working from the perspective of an AMO. If your executives that you're dealing with are sitting at the top level of an organization, you have access to them, so you're dealing with the CEO or the CIO, etc., then you might be able to take the concepts and convince them to move to more of an Agile Management Office function that sits at the top of the organization, that is perpetual, ongoing. It doesn't shut down after the PMO is shut down PMO shut down all the time. It's an ongoing, bigger piece of the puzzle. If you're in a smaller organization and you just want to improve the way you work and you want your customers to be screaming happiness about the way you work, then you need to take the steps involved, and implement them to start seeing those results. And the way that you do that is the way that we describe in that program. So that's pretty much the next stage of going into the detail, going through using the templates, the tools, and the techniques to actually embed that learning.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, I got it. I have my last two questions. Okay, Fatima, do we need any specific software for implementing the Agile Management Office method?
Absolutely not. So the way that it works at the moment is because it has to be agnostic, it looks at what you've got. And if you've got some tools, great, they get incorporated. If you don't, you can start off using Microsoft Excel. It doesn't matter. So we can start off using, depending on the maturity, and then move your way up over time. But you don't need to have any specific software to start with. It's agnostic of that as well.
Awesome. That's why I expected answer. Thank you. And my final one, do we have any training to implement the AMO method?
So this is where the first time we are offering it now is in this 8-week program. We have not, up until this point, offered this anywhere else because we've been using it as part of Agile Management Office, our business. And so now what we're doing is we're getting such interest in actually the results, and we wanted to wait until we got the results, that we now have got the results and can demonstrate its effectiveness. We want to share that more. And what we're going to do is actually, through that 8-week program, train and help guide people through that. We're also having conversations with a couple of organizations, Excelos is one of them, and others around how we can package this up and share it more far and wide. At the moment, the best place to get more experience and information is to be part of the program that will run later this year. And that will be a deep dive with myself personally.
Awesome. Awesome. I think many people right now will be very interested about this next step from you and all your team. Obviously, the people will be is going to watching us in the recorded video. Okay, yeah, most probably is going to be interested about your Agile Management Office program. No, can we call it like this, or how can we say in only one title? How can we say it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the AMO method, which is what you learn to effectively build your own AMO function. So it depends on, as I said, if you're working with the executives, straight away you can start building the Agile Management Office. If you're in a smaller PMO, you're not going to have the executives up front. So you might need to just put the AMO method principles and some of the steps to prove, and then maybe over time that can grow and become an organizational wide. But it's the AMO method is the program.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We don't have any more questions from the audience live, but I think we have all the information. Here is the LinkedIn page, the web page, the website, the email, Twitter. So Fatima, I just want to say thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. It's more than I expected, honestly. But I think we need to keep following you, and we are very, very, very. How can I say? Sorry. Yeah, I sometimes I lost my words in English, but we are going to follow you for the program, for the next steps, for the white papers. If in the future you are going to put on live, program training or program workshops or Agile Management Office workshops or whatever you have, we are going to pay attention in the near future for attending.
Beautiful. That sounds good. Well, I'm happy to share information with you, and you can share it with everybody after. And as I said, I mean, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate everyone's comments in the chat. Nobody else can see these chat comments. So if you're feeling generous and you would like to just make a post on your LinkedIn and just tag me and Leonardo in it, that would be really great, because that will make other people aware of what we're trying to do. And also I do this voluntarily. So I mean, I'm not being paid to do any of these webinars, and we've been doing them for free for the whole 4 years. So your thank you on LinkedIn, recommendation or a comment, anything at all that you feel comfortable sharing if you liked it. And if you didn't like it, let me know as well, because we're always looking to improve. That's what the AMO method is all about. It's about improving. So thank you to everyone. And I look forward to visiting Spain, hopefully in the near future.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Yes, absolutely. We're going to share this presentation with all the audience, with all our followers. And obviously, we are still in the future keep in touch for next sessions, for next information, for everything you are going to share us, because you have many things to share in the future, and we are going to be very, very attention about this. Thank you very much, Fatima from Melbourne, Australia. It was a huge pleasure for us. Thank you very much, my dear. Thank you very much. We are really appreciated from PMO Officers Webinar Series.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everyone. Oh, a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you all our audience, and see you in next one. And don't forget, follow us in PM Officers. Thank you very much all over the world. See you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Leo. Bye. Suerte. Buenas noches.
Gracias, Robert. Gracias. Buenas noches. Hasta la próxima. Gracias a todos. Abrazo.